All right. Table talk. Hitler's table talk. As promised, I wanted to go over this book. This is my copy. I believe I bought this book when I was in the Marines at Borders Bookstore. I think this is still the same copy, unless at some point I had to buy another one. But this is a very fun book, and it's one where I read through it when I first got it, but I still go back to it because it's just kind of fun to read. You could flip it open and just randomly read things. But I figured I would do maybe a little show on it, just because it's been more and more you hear people talking about this, and usually in kind of a dumb context, and usually it gets reduced to people say, oh, that book is fake, it's a hoax, and people say nuh-uh, and so on, usually because people have some kind of mode, like they have some kind of dog in a fight, whether they're a kind of revisionist Nazi or they're an atheist or something who wants to prove that Hitler's Christian, or they have some other problem. Usually, maybe it relates to the religious commentary. Sometimes the commentary on Slavs, but it doesn't really get much deeper than that. And so I thought, there's only I don't really feel like getting into these arguments with people, but I thought I'd just say for the heck of it, just because I think the book is valuable, that this is not fake, and if you actually read it, I think it'll become pretty apparent real quickly. Just because a lot of what is in this book doesn't really fit into any like formula or a neat kind of package, and so it might kind of disrupt some preconceived notions. So if you want to learn about like World War II and Hitler, I think this is probably the best place to start. Better than something like Mein Kampf or Hitler's second book, where there's issues with those two. The issues with the table talk, it goes over them. There are some issues. There are some translation issues, and the fact that the concept of the book is basically Hitler. He would have these talks. The way he kind of ran things, he wasn't that active. He was kind of he thought of himself as an artist, and he lived maybe kind of a lazy lifestyle where he's more kicking it, and he disseminates orders just by people coming to him, and he'll say this or that. It typically is how it goes. He makes his wishes known, and then the other Nazi ministers will carry this out. This goes into a lot of things, explains why there aren't so many different Führer orders for this or that. But this is basically Hitler up late at night, and a lot of people have described this, Leon deGrelle and some of the other guests and things, about how he would he'd just like to pontificate like late into the night, and he'd eat toast and do a bunch of math or something. I don't know. His doctor, he is doing Pervitin, I mean, it's not mentioned, but if you start looking dates up and kind of, figuring things out, not say that he's just totally tweaking, but it seems like something, somebody who might do meth is gonna hang out super late and ramble on about all this stuff. It's a lot of pontificating, and this book isn't a perfect record of that. The biggest issues are in the translation. So Hugh Trevor Roper mentions some of the stuff, and there's however many issues into getting this, but there were errors introduced by a Frenchman that still persist even in this copy and maybe can be cleaned up at a later time. This is in the English translation. So if you get the German, it's going to be a little more, there really aren't so many issues with that, but this also isn't it's not necessarily going to be a verbatim word for word, it's not entirely reliable, but it's not like this is like the Bible or something where you're basing your doctrine on this. This is more, I'd say, it's going to be valuable for research. It's going to be valuable for entertainment, but it's not. Yeah, you can't necessarily take every word to the bank. There's going to be a lot that if you read this, you might be confused about a lot of things, and there are going to be times where you will figure maybe this is an error or maybe not, or whether or not you want to follow up on it. But it's not like it has severe repercussions unless you consider this like a basis for your political doctrine or something, which would be completely insane. But nevertheless, so the guys who compiled this book, it's Borman and a couple other guys. None of them are really they're not trained stenographers. They're writing this stuff down after the fact, and it's kind of fragmentary. This is more like maybe like a hadith or something, where like with Islam, with Muhammad, you have all these hadiths where people will just kind of comment on who maybe saw Muhammad do something, and some of these are very fragmentary and random, but they just compiled every instance of the stuff, and it's just people's recollections, and whatever the reliability of them, they can rate those or whatever. There's no point in doing that or going that crazy. But this is kind of like that, but it's people who are close to Hitler, who are they're writing down as best they can what they heard him say. And so this is kind of like it's very detailed, but some of it might come down to it's like if someone tells you that someone else said something, and maybe you want to take that to as a fact, but maybe not. Maybe you figure they got it wrong. Either way, the stuff in the book is so interesting. It's not and some of it is not expected, and it just seems genuine, and it really it seems like if you have heard maybe or read other quotes from Hitler or people talking about him, it seems very much the same guy. And if it's not, it's definitely an interesting character talking in the book. But there's a lot of things that I think if you study World War II and you're interested in this stuff, you're going to kind of notice that things kind of come together in a certain way, because there are dates here. Just starting with part 1, which goes, this is 1941, the 5th of July is the first entry. And then it kind of breaks up a couple times. and then it goes to 1944 are the last entries. And it's not like there's not necessarily a daily entry, so days can go by before there's anything here, and some of these are much larger than others. And something that makes this book kind of fun is, well, the point I was getting at, let's see, there's a few examples we can kind of talk about. A fun thing about the book is the index. So you can look up different topics you might be interested in, or just by the index, you could just find kind of weird things. So right now we're gonna look up. All right, Getz von Berlichingen. If I pronounced that wrong, I apologize, but I really have no idea, and I'm not saying that I have the best German in the world, but we'll check that out. 419, and I'll kind of explain why I think it's. I'll just read the passage, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so starting with. So this is the 4th of July, 1942, at dinner. And so sometimes it'll give you the name of the guests who are present and things, but here we have Hitler saying, he says, "I think it is very astonishing that men like Ulrich von Hutten and Getz von Berlichingen should have been so far in advance of their times and so progressive in their ideas. It is a great pity that they had behind them in their struggle no strong and concrete doctrine which would have given them the necessary moral elan and perseverance. Their completely German outlook nevertheless entitles them to a high place in the esteem of the German people. I have for this reason suggested that battleships or other large warships at present under construction should be named after them. I rejected the suggestion that a battleship should be named after myself, because if such a ship has bad luck, the superstitious will regard it as an unfavorable omen for my own activities. Imagine a battleship named after me having to spend 6 months in dry dock for repairs. Look, for example, at the very harmful effect the announcement of the destruction of Fort Stalin at Sebastopol had on Russian morale. In a state which is founded on a concrete political philosophy, prudence must be exercised in the naming of warships. October Revolution, Marat, the Commune of Paris, in the Soviet Navy, is an example of what I mean. I have therefore ordered that the battle cruiser Deutschland should be renamed, for the loss of such a ship of that name would cause greater consternation than the loss of any other ship. For the same reason, I will not allow the names of anyone associated with the National Socialist or movement or philosophy to be used for any warships. After a man like Getz von Berlichingen, on the other hand, you can name as many ships as you like, for such is his popularity among the people, that even if any number of ships bearing his name were successively sunk, the christening of a new one with the same name will always be greeted with applause. Okay, so you see what he's saying there. These are historical figures long dead, and so this is like a German folk war hero. You know, this is with the mailed fist. He's got the hand of metal, and so he's saying this is a famous character from German history, so that's what we should name ships after. Because if there's a ship named the Hitler or something, that thing it's gonna, you know, it's gonna look very bad, you know. And figure even now, look at the Russian Navy. The Moskva got sunk some time ago now, But the Ukrainians think that, you name a ship after Moscow, and it's kind of a blow to your morale when they sink your flagship like that. So he's saying, don't do that. But you could get insights into his head and what maybe he might be thinking, especially as he's approaching Stalingrad and things like that. So that's in July 4th, 1942. All right. So then we'll go back. Tell you what. So he says we should name ships after this guy. There's no problem with that. Okay. But you say I don't remember any ships of that name. Well, hold on. Okay. So we go a little bit further. We check another. The index is very good, but it's not entirely complete. There's a lot of things that escape it. The more you kind of dig in, the more you notice the things that maybe could have been there. Okay, so then later we're gonna jump to the 19th of June, 1943. This is at table. So Hitler's at his table. It's one of the. This is why I first bought this book, because the title just seems so funny. Hitler's Table Talk. It's still amusing now, but so he's at his table. Okay, so formerly I planned to construct the most powerful squadron of battleships in the world, and intended to name the two mightiest of them the Ulrich von Hutten and the Getz von Berlichingen. I am now very pleased that I abandoned the idea, for if we had such a squadron, we should be under a moral obligation to use it. Of what practical assistance could such a squadron be today? It would be condemned to playing the part of the last of the knights in armor. Evolution these days has been so swift that it is now the infantry of the sea which assumes the prime importance. Apart from submarines, our greatest need is for little ships, powerful corvettes, destroyers, and the like. These are classes that carry on the fight. The Japanese today possess the most powerful fleet of battleships in the world, but it is very difficult to use them in action. For them, the greatest danger comes from the air. Remember the Bismarck. Okay, that's the full entry. I think it's very amusing. When I first read that this is what I mean. What came to mind is the fact with the dates and this, and he says the other one, and then he says this one. But the shortly after this, they do name later in 1943 SS Panzergrenadier, the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division, which is the Getz von Berlichingen, which fought in Normandy against us. So this is what he doesn't touch on this again, but that's how this must have played out. He wanted to name something after that. He wanted to name the ships after this guy. He abandons the idea, but SS Division might be a good. Why not name one after him? And this also shows kind of what he's thinking in terms of warfare and the introduction of aircraft carriers in World War II and what's going on in the Pacific. How he's watching this. It just adds up kind of nicely if you study history and you just get insights into things in ways that I think if someone just fabricated this, they wouldn't have got something like that. Where I mean, the book doesn't really point this out, but if you're familiar and you start to add things up and you like to cross reference, you come up with some kind of cool things like that. Okay, so things like that make me think it's genuine. Also, just the strangeness of a lot of what he says is I mean, it's very detailed. He talks about people he knows. He goes over old Nazis, and he's always pontificating. And just with the time frame of the book, where it's with Barbarossa kicking off, he goes over. He talks a lot about his opinions on Russians. He talks a lot about his plans for what the Lebensraum would look like, for what he's envisioning out of the Russian territories they capture. They're always kind of dreaming about what this stuff will do, and this can give you a good idea of for the present now. Just randomly flipping through, he's always talking about this stuff. Like he says, in the Crimea, it's warm in February. At the end of April, it's as if someone had waved a magic wand. In a few days, the snow melts and everything turns green again. This passage from one season to the next made, although it's powerful thrusting, is that nothing that can be compared to what happens in our part of the world. You know, he's always kind of going on about what he wants to do in Crimea, how he wants to populate it, and his opinions kind of change too as time goes on. Where at the beginning, he often lumps in all the Soviet people together with the Russians, and he has a very low opinion. So you have Ukraine. That starts to change the further the book gets, and maybe the worse the war starts going. You see where he's talking more at first about annihilating all the Russians, and then later he's using them for slave labor for all these projects. And so you get insights into the how that's going. By the end of it, he's saying that Ukrainians will be introduced into the German race, basically the best of them anyway. He's always kind of thinking about, he's very much a German chauvinist. Anyone who has certain traits, like Polish generals, they'll say that the ones who put up resistance when they invaded were all German. He says, according to Himmler. What else? One thing, there's a few recurring themes, and some of them are very strange and don't get that talked about that much. But a lot of the book goes into this. There's an appendix even in the book that goes over, it's Martin Bormann's report on how they're going to, he has a memorandum on how in the post-war, they're going to repopulate, from all their losses, all the casualties. And he talks about this, and it turns into a memorandum. And based on that, where they're talking about reintroducing polygamy and this sort of thing. But throughout the book, one of the, and this ties into some of the criticisms of Christianity and things like that. But he'll always talk about, say, illegitimate children. And there's times where Hitler seems very kind of liberal. I mean, I know that liberalism and Nazism are the same, if you're a conservative or whatever. But he very much thinks of himself as tolerant and progressive and open-minded and a free thinker, and maybe not so much like a rigid dictator. But we'll go into okay, maybe we'll just start going. So where are we at? Let's start. We'll stop in March 1st, 1943. Special guest Himmler. Okay, this is Hitler table talking in the evening. He says, in the eyes of a woman, the finest of dresses at once loses its charm. If she sees another woman wearing one like it, I've seen a woman suddenly leave the opera at the sight of a rival who had entered a box wearing the same dress as herself. "What cheek," she said. "I'm going." In the pleasure a woman takes in rigging herself out, there is always an admixture of some troublemaking element, something treacherous to awaken another woman's jealousy by displaying something that the latter doesn't possess. Women have the talent, which is unknown to us males, for giving a kiss to a woman friend and at the same time piercing her heart with a well-shapen stiletto. Maybe I'll skip ahead. Other women are extremely careful of their appearance. He talks about women quite a bit. Without doubt, okay. When I was a child, only actors and priests had shaven faces. Leondig, the only civilian whose face was beardless, was regarded as the most extreme of eccentrics. The beard gives character to some faces, but it's easier to describe the true personality of a shaven man. By the way, evolution that has taken place in the sense of sobriety seems to accord with the laws of nature. Hasn't man gradually, through the ages, cleared away some of his hair? In the countries where women are more numerous than men, the female has recourse to all kinds of methods to dispossess her rivals. It's a form of the spirit of conservation. A law of the species, the gentlest woman is transformed into a wild beast when another woman tries to take away your man. The bigger the element of femininity in a woman, the further is this instinct developed. Must one regard this innate savagery as a fault? Is it not rather a virtue? The state of society in which woman was regarded merely as a slave, as is still the case in certain tribes, would be, if we return to it, a clear regression for humanity. But it's not the only possible state. In prehistoric times, matriarchy was certainly a fairly widely spread form of social organization. When all is said, a people never dies out for lack of men. Let's remember that after the 30 Years' War, polygamy was tolerated, so that it was thanks to the illegitimate child that the nation recovered its strength. Such particular situations cannot give rise to a legal regulation. But as long as we have in Germany 2.5 million women vowed to celibacy, we shall be forbidden to despise the child born out of wedlock. Social prejudices are in the process of disappearing. More and more nature is reclaiming her rights. We're moving in the proper direction. I've much more respect for the woman who has an illegitimate child than for an old maid. I've often been told of unmarried women who had children and brought these children up in a truly touching manner. It often happens amongst women servants, notably. The women who have no children finally go off their heads. It's somewhat striking to observe that the majority of peoples, the number of women exceeds that of men. What harm is there then in every woman's fulfilling her destiny? I love to see this display of health around me. The opposite thing would make me misanthropic, and I'd become really so if all I had to look at were the spectacle of 10,000 so-called elite. Luckily for me, I've always retained contacts with the people. Amongst the people, moral health is obligatory. It goes so far that in the country, one never reproaches a priest for having a liaison with his servant. People even regard it as a kind of guarantee. The women and the girls of the village need not protect themselves. In any case, women of the people are of full understanding. They admit that a young priest can't sweat his sperm out through his brain. The hypocrites are to be found amongst the 10,000 strong elite. That's where one meets the Puritan who can reproach his neighbor for his adventures, forgetting that, he himself has married a divorcee. Everybody should draw from his own experience the reason to show himself indulgent towards others. Marriage, as it is practiced in bourgeois society, is generally a thing against nature, but a meeting between two beings who complete one another, who are made for one another, borders already, in my conception, upon a miracle. I often think of these women who people the convents because they haven't met the man with whom they would have wished to share their lives. With the exception of those who were promised to God by their parents, most of them, in fact, are women cheated by life. Human beings are made to suffer passively. Rare are the beings capable of coming to grips with existence. Okay. So these are some of the themes that are okay, that he talks about quite a bit. It's he always brings up maybe he'll bring up like societies that look down on illegitimate children as backwards, and ones that are more tolerant as very good. Like he constantly brings this up, and it seems to be something he thinks about a lot, and that means something to him. Maybe because of his own family history, and also his ideas of against the Catholic Church, and other things that influence this, and also his plans for the future that involve polygamy. But when he mentions that they've got medical personnel in the Ukraine who examine Ukrainian women, and he says like a shocking number of them to him are still virgins in adulthood, and he bragged that in Germany, basically you won't find that with any girls. He brags that basically his people, the women of Germany, are sluttier than those of the Soviet Union, and it's maybe things that you wouldn't expect. I'm just kind of flipping through. Okay, here's some church stuff. I don't know where I want to start. So it's not okay. You're talking about religion being weighed down by a superstitious past. Oh, hold on. We'll get some context here. I'll go. Himmler's the guest. This is 14th October 1941, midday. I'll just start. Like I said, the fun thing about this book is, like, I read through it, but then I still like to just kind of flip back, and it's something fun to kind of, if you don't feel like getting into another book, or you just kind of feel like reading something weird or amusing for a little bit, you can kind of just flip this open, and there's just, I mean, you'll forget however much, and kind of go back to it and think about it. All right. It may be asked whether concluding a concordat with the churches wouldn't facilitate. I don't want to read all. Where was I? Time will go by until a moment when science can answer all the questions. So it's not opportune to hurl ourselves now into the struggle with the churches. The best thing is to let Christianity die a natural death. A slow death has something comforting about it. The dogma of Christianity gets worn away before the advances of science. Religion will have to make more and more concessions. Gradually the myths crumble. All that's left is to prove that in nature, there's no frontier between organic and the organic. So in Christianity, of course, hold on. The instruction of a hygienic nature that most religions gave contributed to the foundation of organized communities. The precepts ordering people to wash, to avoid certain drinks, to fast at appointed times, the exhortation to fight courageously is also self-explanatory. Observe, by the way, that as a corollary, the Mussulman, this is the Muslim, was promised a paradise peopled with houris, where wine flowed in streams, a real earthly paradise. The Christians, on the other hand, declare themselves satisfied if after their death they are allowed to sing hallelujahs. All these elements contributed to form human communities. So on and so forth. Here's what caught my eye. It seems to me that nothing would be more foolish than to reestablish the worship of Wotan. Our old mythology has ceased to be viable when Christianity implanted itself. Nothing dies unless it is moribund. At that period, the ancient world was divided between the systems of philosophy and the worship of idols. It's not desirable that the whole of humanity should be stultified, and the only way of getting rid of Christianity is to allow it to die little by little. A movement like ours mustn't let itself be drawn into metaphysical digressions. It must stick to the spirit of the exact science. It's not the party's function to be a counterfeit for religion. If in the case, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is very much against Christianity, and he speaks I mean, this is, if you wanna to say that this must be a mistranslation at these parts, that's fine. if if you're like I don't know, like a Catholic Nazi or something, you might say that, I don't like that, but you know I don't know. You might need to come to grips with this stuff. This is just his opinions. This stuff doesn't offend me. I'm a Christian personally. I mean, I don't agree with this, but yeah, I'll say as a Baptist, I understand a fair amount of criticisms of Christianity, and a lot of times when people say what they don't like about Christianity or even pagans or something, I can agree. Not that I'm trying to get into weird sectarian things. I think people and who act like you need to get on their religious program to get into politics are kind of foolish. Like, I mean, I just support freedom of religion, and usually when people have these kind of criticisms, I'll try to hear them out, unless it's just some insane, dumb level of blasphemy. But these are more like someone's private thoughts and what they think. I mean, if you actually care about just getting insight into the stuff. Okay, what else we got? Just flip. We must be careful not to push organization too far, for the slightest accident can jam the whole machine. For example, it would be a mistake to decree that in the Ukraine the quality of the soil means that we should sow nothing but wheat. No, we must also leave room for pastures. Nature has made the various regions of the earth in such a way as to ensure a sort of autarky for our earth, and man must respect this modified kind of order. We shall therefore let the marshlands continue to exist, not only because they will be useful to us as fields for maneuvers, but also in the order to respect the local climatological conditions and to prevent the desert from gradually encroaching on the fertile regions. The marshes play the role of a sponge. Without them, it might happen that a whole crop was wiped out by a wave of heat. So he's always kind of pontificating about different ideas like this, and he'll bring up things even that people, you'll hear people talk about now, like he has ideas about oil that he thinks it could be just naturally replenishing in reservoirs under the earth in certain ways. And it's a lot of speculation, and it's a lot of random ideas from random reading. It makes it more interesting than something more propagandistic like Mein Kampf or Hitler's second book or something like that. And I think is closer to what Hitler's movement was about, because it wasn't something like communism, where Marxism has a formula to it and everything's supposed to fit in place, and everything kind of, it seems very consistent in certain ways. Everything has to fit. There's really nothing like that with this. It's more it's I mean, maybe some things, but there's a lot more random to this, and just different ideas kind of put together and come from different places. Well, what else do we have? This should be, maybe we can find some weirder things. The fun thing about the book is kind of the weirder stuff. Okay. Yeah, so this is, wait, all right. Yeah, that's funny. June 24th, 1943, in the evening. All right. Do I want to do the... He talks about Mozart. He talks... Wait. The Berlin workman is unique as a swift and efficient craftsman. There's nothing to touch him in Munich or Vienna, where the infusion of foreign blood, Polish, Czech, Slav, Italian, still has an influence. He was therefore So this is Mozart. It's not a Swabian. Okay, hold on. This really creative music is composed partly of inspiration and partly of a sense of composition. The inspiration is of Slavonic origin. The art of composition is of Germanic. It is when these two mingle in one man that the master of genius appears. In Bach's music, it is the composition which is marvelous. And he certainly had no drop of Slav blood in his veins. As regards Beethoven, on the other hand, one glance at his head shows that he comes of a different race. It is not pure chance that the British have never produced a composer of genius. It is because they are a pure Germanic race. And he talks about this. I thought that was kind of surprising that he would say this about Slav Germanic mixtures, especially with some of the other things he says. But he comes to grips. He has a lot of racial pontificating in here. He describes Germany in the book as being 4/5 Germanic, where he says, the British are purely Germanic. But there's a lot. But he's talking about there's however much, Slavic, this and that. But he thinks it's a good thing right there. What else do we got? Maybe we'll just start on page 1. Maybe we'll just read the whole thing. This is how the book starts. All right. The first, Saturday, the 5th of July, 1941. And the topic, Aryans and Russians. The necessity of the mailed fist in Russia. Deterioration of soil. He says, what we need is a collective view of people's wish to live and manner of living. So that's the first sentence of the book. We must distinguish between the fascist popular movement and the popular movement in Russia. The fascist movement is a spontaneous return to the traditions of ancient Rome. The Russian movement has an essential tendency towards anarchy. By instinct, the Russian does not incline towards a higher form of society. Certain peoples can live in such a way that with them a collection of family units does not make a whole. And although Russia has set up a social system which, judged by Western standards, qualifies for the designation state, it is not, in fact, a system which is either congenial or natural to her. It is true that, in a sense, every product of human culture, every work gifted with beauty can be born only of the effect of the constraint which we call education. The Aryan peoples are peoples who are particularly active. A man like Krumel works from morning to night. Such and such another person never stops thinking. In the same way, the Italian is as diligent as an ant. In the eyes of the Russian, the principal support of civilization is vodka. His ideal consists in never doing anything but the indispensable. Our conception of work, and then more of it, is one that he submits to as if it were a real curse. It is doubtful whether anything at all can be done in Russia without the help of the Orthodox priest. It's the priest who has been able to reconcile the Russian to the fatal necessity of work, by promising him more happiness in another world. The Russian will never make up his mind to work except under compulsion from outside, for he is incapable of organizing himself. And if, despite everything, he is apt to have organization thrust upon him, that is thanks to the drop of Aryan blood in his veins. It is only because of this drop that the Russian people has created something and possesses an organized state. It takes energy to rule Russia. The corollary is that the tougher a country's regime, the more appropriate it is that equity and justice should be practiced there. The horse that is not kept constantly under control forgets in the wink of an eye the rudiments of training that have been inculcated into it. In the same way, the Russian, there is an instinctive force that invariably leads him back to the state of nature. People sometimes quote the case of the horses that escaped from a ranch in America, and by some 10 years later had formed huge herds of wild horses. It is so easy for an animal to go back to its origins. For the Russian, the return to the state of nature is a return to primitive forms of life. The family exists, the female looks after her children, like the female of the hare, with all the feelings of the mother, but the Russian doesn't want anything more. His reaction against the constraint of the organized state, which is always a constraint since it limits the liberty of the individual, is brutal and savage, like all feminine reactions. When he collapses and should yield, the Russian bursts into lamentations. This will to return to the state of nature is exhibited in his revolutions. For the Russian, the typical form of revolution is nihilism. I think there's still petroleum in thousands of places. As for, oh yeah, I mentioned this. As for coal, we know we're reducing. So he kind of jumps from that one thing to another. It might not have necessarily went how this conversation went, but it's how it was written down and recorded. And that in doing so, we are creating gaps in the subsoil. But as for petroleum, it may be that the lakes from which we are drawing are constantly renewed from invisible reservoirs. Without doubt, man is the most dangerous microbe imaginable. He exploits the ground beneath his feet without ever asking whether he is disposing thus of products that would perhaps be indispensable to the life of other regions. If one examined the problem closely, one would probably find that here the origin of the catastrophes that occur periodically in the Earth's surface. So this is the kind of speculating we get. He thinks of himself as very open-minded, and he's always kind of talking about microscopes, and he's interested in that. Like he says that we're kind of buffered by the infinite on both sides, because we have, on one hand, space, and then also he says we could. He says if we have powerful enough microscopes, we could maybe find entire worlds that can't be seen otherwise. So it's a lot of interesting ideas that you might have speculated on yourself. But this is giving just a lot of insight into the person. This also gives a lot of insight into since he's always going over the vision for Russia, what we want to do with it. And it shows a lot about it gives insight into the present situation with Ukraine, where you see why it's considered so valuable. And it's not completely lost on certain people in America, although it's probably lost on most of them. But it's definitely not lost on the Russians, and they know exactly what the value of this territory, what it is. It's referred to over and over again, and basically, yeah, you can get the idea that this is how they're going to break the rules of economics. This is going to turn Germany, turn their Third Reich into the super state with this new territory, because with this black soil and everything, they can grow everything they need to so what we're dealing with now, the Russians certainly see the same way, and this is how Stalin's seen this too. But Putin definitely he sees what this territory can do for Russia. It's not, when conservatards will go on about how they see no value in this stuff. They have no geopolitical vision. This kind of, not to say, like, I'm not saying you're gonna agree with this book. It's Hitler, but this gives an idea of this kind of thinking and this level of geopolitical thinking beyond just not to say that this isn't gone over in similar terms, frankly, in stuff like Mein Kampf or in Hitler's speeches and things. But he actually gives an idea beyond just propaganda. He'll go into his ideas about propaganda. You get real insight with the stuff. And but you could pretty much just flip it over. And there's always going to be kind of. What is it? We've forgotten. Hold on. We're in 25th of September, midday. The topics are fanaticism of Russian leaders, stupidity of the Russian soldier, the perpetual menace of Asia, a living wall, justifiable claims. Okay, where do you want to jump in? On the other hand, the offensive spirit. We've forgotten the bitter tenacity with which the Russians fought us during the First World War. In the same way, coming generations will see in the campaign now in progress only the magnificent operation that it will have been, without giving any more thought to the numerous crises that we had to overcome by reason of this tenacity. Maybe not. We knew during the First World War a type of Russian combatant who was more good-natured than cruel. Nowadays, this type no longer exists. Bolshevism has completely wiped it out. Asia, what a disquieting reservoir of men. The safety of Europe will not be assured until we have driven Asia back behind the Urals. No organized Russian state must be allowed to exist west of that line. They are brutes, and neither Bolshevism nor Tsarism makes any difference. They are brutes in a state of nature. The danger would be still greater if this space were to be Mongolized. Suddenly a wave comes foaming down from Asia and surprises a Europe benumbed by civilization and deceived by the illusion of a collective security. Since there is no natural protection against such a flood, we must meet it with a living wall. A permanent state of war on the Eastern Front will help to form a sound race of men, and will prevent us from relapsing into the softness of a Europe thrown back upon itself. The points we have reached are dotted along areas that have retained the memory of a Germanic expansion. We've been before at the Iron Gates, at Belgrade, in the Russian space. The German past in its totality constitutes our own patrimony. Whatever may be the dynasty, whatever may be the stock from which we arise, it is important to bring together in the German pantheon all the glories of Germany's past as Ludwig I did in the eyes of the world. As regards myself, I shall never live to see it, but one day my successors must be in a position to bring out from a drawer every historical date that justifies a German claim. Once our position is consolidated, we shall be able in this sphere to go back as far as the great invasions. Berlin must be the true center of Europe, a capital that for everybody shall be the capital. Okay. All right, what do we want to go? Where should we go now? Should we just search for a random spot? The book also goes into, because of the where am I don't know. He talks a lot about his opinions on Jewish people, and he brings up that they're getting rid of the Jews out of Europe, and it's right along the time frame of Action Reinhard, and right after, in fact, even before Pearl Harbor in this book, he refers to the prophecy, the one he makes in his Pearl Harbor speech, that the Jews are going to be eliminated from Europe, and he speaks in he's speaking pretty frankly on this stuff. I mean, Hitler mentions that, he says, in his opinion, Jews have no creativity. There are people with no creativity. They're only capable of destruction. So this is his view, and you can get what might be a logical course of action. I mean, I don't agree with that. I think Jews are, a lot of Jewish people are very creative, but this is what he says in the book. But here, I'm just flipping to a random page, and we're in 1st of July, 1942. This confirms my. I'm just gonna jump in the middle of this. He's talking to I don't know. I'm not going to get into it. This confirms the opinion I have already expressed. Wait. I'll go back further. I was nevertheless repeatedly assured that in the family tree of Freiherr, which went very far back, there was no vestige of non-Aryan ancestry, and now, by pure chance, we have found out that one of Freiherr's ancestors, born at Frankfurt on Main in 1616, was a pure 100% Jew. And so, although more than 300 years separate the present Freiherr from his Jewish ancestor, and although, with this one exception, all his ancestors were pure Aryan, he nevertheless has all the unmistakable racial characteristics of the Jew. This confirms the opinion I have already expressed when speaking about the Englishman Cripps, that all half-caste families, even if they have but a minute even but a minute quantity of Jewish blood in their veins, produce regularly, generation by generation, at least one pure Jew. Roosevelt affords the best possible proof of the truth of this opinion. Roosevelt, who, both in his handling of political issues and in his general attitude, behaves like a torturous, pettifogging Jew, himself boasted recently that he had noble Jewish blood in his veins. The completely negroid appearance of his wife is also a clear indication that she, too, is a half-caste. Such examples should open the eyes of all reasonable people and be a warning of the menace that half-caste can be. A complete assimilation of foreign blood is not possible, and the characteristics of the foreign race inevitably continue to reappear. Our people, therefore, is only harming itself if it accepts half-castes into the Wehrmacht, and thus admits them into a position of equality with pure-blooded Germans. We cannot accept the responsibility of burdening our bloodstream with the addition of further foreign elements. Exceptions in favor of half-caste must therefore be reduced to a minimum. The surest sign of the collapse of the British domination in Egypt is the instruction. Okay. Well, that was kind of interesting. I don't know if I need to go into that, but this is a different attitude, and maybe this will just seem different to you, if you're American. And I know the attitudes that people have, they think that if you join the military, you're being like sent to your death, and that, like the people who run things, they want you to join the military so they could just, kill you or something. But this is the opposite attitude where, he only, he actually doesn't want people he doesn't like in his military. Okay. Let me see. All right. Just a random flip through. To return to Egypt, I hope that the Italians, who so far have shown considerable skill in their relations with the Mussulmans, will not tarnish the reputation they have. I mean, I cannot repeat too often that, as in Egypt, so in our eastern territories, road construction is one of the most important tasks. As road maintenance is practically impossible during the winter, the new roads must be so sited and constructed as not to expose them to the dangers of snowdrifts. They must be constructed for the most part on embankments, which the winds of winter will sweep free of any undue accumulation of snow, and the foundations of embankment must be particularly solidly constructed, bearing in mind the powerfully disintegrating forces of the thaw period. Where it is available, granite must be used, otherwise the stone, which abounds in all riverbeds. This is very detailed, going over all this stuff. That was in the 9th of July, 1942. All right. In Russia, the commissar chooses the programs, and the listeners are therefore completely cut off from the influence of foreign propaganda, so on and so forth. Oh, yeah. A lot of... Okay. What else do we got? Or should we hit up the index, and then we can just find some fun stuff, or we can just randomly flip. Okay. What a fine race that the Dutch are. Okay. Oh, where are we at? The 6th of September, midday. So a lot of this is at night, but some of it is in midday. But either way, he's just apparently pontificating and stuff. All right, I just want to stop where what I saw. What a fine race the Dutch are. The girls are splendid. And very much to my taste. The blemishes in the Dutch are due to interbreeding with the Malays, and that, in its turn, is the result of the sexual urge and the lack of sufficiency of white women in their colonies. We had much the same thing in our own colonies. A German had the right to marry a negress, provided she was a Catholic, but not a German girl if she happened to be a Protestant. Even today, the Catholic priest chatters for months if one of his flock wishes to marry a Protestant. It is not very long ago that in the country, a marriage between Catholic and Protestant was stigmatized as an insult to the holy altar, but nobody bothered their heads about the color of bastards. In the British Empire, things are very different, but the Church of England is a political rather than ecclesiastical organization. Again and again, I am asked to sanction marriage between one of our soldiers and a foreign girl, and as often as not, the soldier is a splendid young lad and the girl a little trollop. Nothing but catastrophe could come of such unions. The branches of the services most exposed to this danger are the Navy and the anti-aircraft units because they stay in one place longer than anyone else. It was the same in the First World War. The Flemish girls were the most attractive, and had the war had a normal ending, many of them would undoubtedly have married German soldiers. Then it says, the Fuhrer turns jestingly to Admiral Kranke. Your sailors have only 3 hours liberty ashore each day. Can't you give them a bit more? If they must hang about in a port, they will be best employed chasing the girls. Okay. So, again, he always likes his stuff. And what else we got? Some of it. Japanese come up quite a bit. If that's a topic you care to hear about. What else do we want to do? The only romance... Okay. What's this? 15 June 1943. It is perfectly true that we are a people of romantics quite different from the Americans, for example, who see nothing beyond their skyscrapers. Our romanticism has its origins in the intense appreciation of nature that is inherent in us Germans. Properly to appreciate such artists as Weber, Ludwig Hector, and the other romanticists, one must know Franconian mountains, for that is the background which gives birth to romanticism in both music and painting. And of course, the stories and legends of our folklore also make a potent contribution. The only romance which stirs the heart of the North American is that of the Redskin, but it is curious to note that the writer who has produced the most vivid Redskin romances is a German. One thing the Americans have, and which we lack, is the sense of the vast open spaces, hence the particular characteristic of our own form of nostalgia. There comes a time when this desire for expansion can no longer be contained and must burst into action. It is an irrefutable fact that the Dutch, for example, who occupied the most densely populated portions of the German lands, were driven centuries ago by this irresistible desire for expansion, to seek ever wider conquest abroad. What I wonder would happen to us if we had not at least the illusion of vast spaces at our disposal. For me, one of the charms of the Spessart is that one can drive there for hours on end and never meet a soul. Our Autobahn give me the same feeling. Even the more quickly populated areas, they reproduce the atmosphere of open spaces. Getting more into Lebensraum, feelings of open spaces. If you read like memoirs of German soldiers on the Eastern Front, this is remarked on a lot, actually. That when they're on the Eastern Front, the vastness of it in these open spaces kind of hits them hard as something they're maybe not used to. Okay. And there's a lot of talk just about how they rely on war, how war is it's something that National Socialism, that their ideology relies on, because they select. I mean, they write about how they disdain the old nobility, and there's a lot of talk about that in this book, and how the old nobles are stupid, and all, there's no point in this. But they need to make a new nobility, and they have the same kind of basic selection for it, which is war. And the way that they promote, I mean, it's basically like, for them, like, the longer you're in the party, the more you do for the party, the more you do for the more they want to do for you, the more they can rely on you. So there's a point where Hitler's looking at possibly, if they win World War II, he's not sure what if there's a future where they achieve peace. He pontificates quite a bit on if things will all fall apart, if people are going to get soft, if the more scurrilous and corrupt characters are going to be the ones who rise to power. Okay, here's one with here's another Christianity one, which is one of the reasons people are so obsessed with this book, and if it's fake or if it's not. Hitler says, this is 1944, the night of 2019 to the 30th. So this goes over midnight, talking and stuff. Hitler says, Jesus was most certainly not a Jew. The Jews would never have handed one of their own people to the Roman courts. They would have condemned him themselves. It is quite probable that a large number of the descendants of the Roman legionaries, mostly Gauls, were living in Galilee, and Jesus was probably one of them. His mother may well have been a Jewess. Jesus fought against the materialism of his age, and therefore against the Jews. Paul of Tarsus, who was originally one of the most stubborn enemies of the Christians, suddenly realized the immense possibilities of using intelligently and for other ends an idea which was exercising such great powers of fascination. He realized that the judicious exploitation of this idea among non-Jews would give him far greater power in the world than would the promise of material profit to the Jews themselves. It was then that the future St. Paul distorted with the diabolical cunning the Christian idea. Out of this idea, which is a declaration of war on the golden calf, on the egotism and the materialism of the Jews, he created a rallying point for slaves of all kinds against the elite, the masters and those in dominant authority. The religion fabricated by Paul of Tarsus, which was later called Christianity, is nothing but the communism of today. Bormann intervenes. Okay. And so this comes up quite a bit, that Christianity, this is basically Nietzsche, the genealogy of morals, right? It's a good deal of that book anyway. It seems like he read that, or at least he got this idea. I don't know if people say that he didn't read Nietzsche or he didn't understand Nietzsche, but what he's saying is a lot like what Nietzsche says in that book. He doesn't particularly go on and on about Nietzsche. He does mention Schopenhauer more than that, and he says that's pretty much his guy for philosophy is Schopenhauer. He says that's what he carried in World War one with him. That's what he was into. He's also likes Kant and is not into Heckel. All right. What else do we got? Okay. All right. Maybe we'll go to the index and try to find some stuff. All right. Incas. Okay. No. Jews, art critics, art influence on Jesus, not a Jew. I don't know if Nietzsche's, that might have been an addition, but Nietzsche is I mean, what he says about Paul, he likes Jesus Christ. He's not into Paul. Paul ruins everything. This is an idea. So this goes beyond. Some people say Hitler only bashes Catholicism in this, but this actually is an attack on the Bible itself. Maybe these are his opinions, so you don't have to accept that. But Julian the Apostate, he certainly admires. What else do we got? Some of these are Field Marshal William Keitel on Bible students. I don't know. Final ruin after the war. Adventures of Bolshevism. Okay. I'm going to just get into something kind of strange. Mussolini talks about the raid on the Brown House. Race in... I mean, there's a lot you can get into. There's the Emperor Nero, SS, indifference to religion. You're criticizing Rosenberg. Russia. What's Russia and India? All the Russian no more war slogan. See also colonization, Eastern Front, and Ukraine. Moscow must be destroyed. Leningrad must be destroyed. These are index entries. U.S. war material. Maybe we'll check that out. What's he say about that? Or what's first? All right, he's talking about something he brings up a lot is Spain too, and how he actually doesn't. Well, here I'll actually. Oh wait, I meant to go into what the U.S. war material in Russia. What's this say? To my great delight, our aircraft, this is 1942, 8th of July, destruction of the British convoy bound for Archangel. To my great delight, our aircraft and submarines have already succeeded in sinking no less than 32 ships out of a British convoy of 38 on its way to Archangel. Even yesterday, when a bare 2/3 had been sunk, I urged the drawing of the caricature of Roosevelt in Gladderdach. So I urged the drawing of a caricature. Most of the war material in this convoy came from America, and I suggest that Roosevelt should therefore be shown sitting on a high platform and laughingly casting into the sea all the tanks, planes, and other material that the American workmen were handing up to him. The caption I suggested was, "We do not fight for gain or gold, but for a better world." Be that as it may, the owners of naval construction yards in America have certainly veritable gold mines in their possession. Okay? So, our period all right, just reading something else. What else? At the SS rallies, it was the females of the communist species who were the most despicable. These hags would pelt our men with everything they could lay their hands on, and when our men started to defend themselves, they would hold up their children, regardless of the danger, as shields to protect themselves. What better proof than that can you have of their complete disregard for the safety and welfare of their children, in which they show themselves to be complete antithesis of the normal parent and faithful adherents to their own criminal antisocial instincts? Okay. There's just so much. There's a lot of funny stuff. Like Hitler talks about vegetarianism a lot in the book, or he says he feeds his dog herbs and things like that. Okay, here they're talking about Spain. I'll just go. This will be kind of a long passage, and then maybe after this we'll be done. Even though if you're having fun with this, I don't know. I think this is a lot of fun, but here it says General Jodl told the Fuhrer this is 7th July 1942 at dinner, of an incident which had occurred at the Spanish frontier on the occasion of the return home of some wounded Blue Division. These men were refused places in the South Express. And when they tried to get into the guards van, a company of the infantry intervened on the order of the military governor and ejected them. Marshal Keitel suggested that the Blue Division was in bad odor because of its name, the color blue being a reminder of the old original Phalange, which was not a disciple of the church. In the new Phalange, admission could be obtained only with the approval of the local priest. The Fuhrer said, "The Spanish situation is developing in a deplorable fashion. Franco obviously has not the personality to face up to the political problems of the country. Even so, he started off from a much more favorable position than either the Duce or myself. For we both had not only to capture the state, but also to win over the armed forces to our side. Franco, on the other hand, had both political power and military force in his own hands. It is sooner obvious that he is incapable of freeing himself from the influence of Serrano, in spite of the fact that the latter is the personification of the parson in politics and is blatantly playing a dishonest game with the Axis powers. In point of fact, these parsons are too stupid for words. They are trying through Serrano Sr. to give a reactionary impulse to Spanish politics and to restore the monarchy. All they will succeed in doing, however, is to cause another civil war, which they themselves will certainly never survive. General Jodl suggested that this isn't Hitler talking, the British pound might be well behind it all, and that the British hoped in this way to create a second front. The Fuhrer continued, one must be careful not to put the Franco regime on the same level as National Socialism or fascism. Tott, who employs many so-called red Spaniards in his workshop, tells me repeatedly that these reds are not red in our sense of the word. They regard themselves as revolutionaries in their own right and as industrious and skilled workers, have greatly distinguished themselves, and as industrious and skilled workers have greatly distinguished themselves. The best thing we can do is to hold as many of these people as we can. All right, wait. This goes on and on, but there's parts in the book where Hitler's getting like reports from Spain about like they're like promoting dead saints to generals, and he's flipping out, and he'll talk about how maybe they supported the wrong side, but he becomes more sympathetic, say, to the other side in Spain, and points out that he had his own reasons for intervening, which were not necessarily to save Franco and his people, who he seems to despise, and even considers that maybe in the future he'll have to invade Spain and get rid of Franco. Anyhow, I think with that, I'll just call it. This video is just about kind of having fun, and also just a defense of this book as a valuable historical insight. Not that, like I say, not that you need to consider this like something authoritative. It's just something that can help you. I don't know, and you might just have fun reading. And, I have fun reading it, and I don't know. We'll just call it good there. But yeah, thanks for tuning in.